Well, welcome, everybody. I'm Selena Rezvani, and you're joining Women in Work Culture. This is a live stream all about those positive practices and habits for making your workplace more inclusive for women, because your business depends on it. I'm joined today by the awesome Stacey Bain. She's CFAO at Catalyst. And if you don't know Catalyst, this is a global nonprofit that's all about accelerating women's career success. So we can totally get behind that mission here. Welcome, Stacey. We're so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Selena. That's very exciting.
Yay. Yeah, we're so excited to have you. And for those of you joining us today, say hi, drop us a note, and tell us where in the world you're joining from so we can give you a shout out and a welcome. Stacey, I want to tell people a little bit about you because I think you are so uniquely qualified to be talking about our topic today of sponsorship. Right? You have both been a sponsor to other people in their career, but you've also said you've benefited from being sponsored. Before Catalyst, you served as CFO at Hello Alfred, which is a New York City-based startup. And prior to that, Stacey was EVP of Finance and Operations at Sony Music. How cool is that? And also, CFAO of Amnesty International. So what a really cool tapestry, Stacey, you've kind of woven in your career. As we go today, for those joining us and listening, send us your questions for Stacey, and we're going to try to get to those as much as we can. So, Stacey, like we talked about, you've had this really cool, multifaceted career across different industries. I'm curious how you've kind of integrated that path with your current focus on, gender equality with Catalyst. How did you bring those together?
Yeah, thanks, Selena. It's interesting with this chapter in my professional history, and you look back sometimes, the chapters don't make sense until you're able to look back on them. So, after spending an amazing career in the music industry, I decided to, run the playbook with my children who are graduating college and diversify out of recorded music and try some different things. And, whether it was working with Amnesty, that was in the middle of a new strategic plan, and just really getting some deep mission-related, good karma experience there, or working in the tech sector. I was doing a lot of change management and a lot of learning, and at the end of many years of having to affect change, I just realized that I like to work with people who are passionate about their product, about their mission, and landing at Catalyst, I am like the product. I feel like I can tell the story authentically about how women progress in the workplace, and certainly how we can help make it a better experience and a more equitable experience.
Yeah, because some of those industries were pretty male dominated at times, right?
Very, all the time.
Okay.
Very much all the. I mean, not less so. Hello Alfred was a female-founded startup, and at Amnesty, there was more diversity, and that was a very rewarding experience as well. But certainly, 20 years in the music industry, and then advertising and ad tech is very male-dominated.
Yeah. Well, you have supporters joining from Seattle, Tampa, Beverly Hills, Philly suburbs, another Philly person. So we got a lot of coastal areas covered today, which is exciting. Glad to have you all. You've said mentors and sponsors have been huge for you in your career, and I want to differentiate those for anyone listening who maybe isn't sure of the difference. And so, when you think about sponsors, those are really the high-ranking individuals who've got the influence and the clout to advance your career. So they've got that position in the hierarchy to make things happen. Different from a mentor who is more like a friendly guide, maybe giving you advice, but isn't necessarily high ranking in the organization. There's a great Catalyst quote: mentors talk with you, sponsors talk about you. I think that sums it up really nicely. Will you give us an example, Stacey, for you of a sponsor relationship that made a difference in your career?
Sure. I have had many different types of sponsor relationships. I actually will highlight two. One is kind of more of the standard sponsorship by a supervisor who, when I came back from my first maternity leave, actually promoted me in at the music in the music industry, in royalties, and promoted me to the top of the royalty department. And I had gone on maternity leave as a royalty accountant, and I came back in this big position, and I said, well, I'm not ready for this. I can't do this. And he was like, well, we wouldn't be thinking about you if we didn't think that you could do it. Now, I was working at the time for Bertelsmann Music Group, and Bertelsmann is a very rigorous talent trainer and gives people the space to really experiment and fail, and understands that that's a growth opportunity. And so that sponsor really was one of the major catalysts in my professional history for advancement, because it gave me a whole new set of tools and confidence to try new things and not be afraid to fail. And also to do a lot of management training and to understand how to meet people where they are in order to, create a team. You're not really successful ever on your own. You are successful because of the people that are around you and who you can influence. But another interesting sponsorship example was at Sony when I piloted a women's leadership initiative, and the head of human resources globally, said to me, you need an executive sponsor. And this is a while back, and I hope this wouldn't have happened today. And so I went to the president of my division, who I actually preceded, and thought it was a no-brainer because he had been on this journey with me to put this program together, and he wouldn't do it. And so I had to go into the organization and find another sponsor, and I found the sponsor in a colleague in the digital music sector, which I think, is probably more forward thinking at the time. And this man sponsored the Women's Leadership Initiative, and he was like, our guest at in the program, and it was very well celebrated. But that was an example of having to go look for a sponsor, someone who's going to speak for me when my supervisor wouldn't do it. So they come in different sizes and voices, but sponsors really do advocate and have a voice with an audience that will help with your progression.
Yeah, those are great examples. And I love that you gave us some different ones, especially what you said in the first one. Sometimes we think about sponsors doing this big, grand thing in your career. But I like that you mentioned basically this person suggested you could do more. Like that alone planted a seed for you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I am up for it, right? Maybe I can do it. And I think that's a little thing that goes a long way. I want to talk a little about internal versus external sponsors. Is it enough to have an external sponsor outside your company, or do you think having an internal one is kind of a must?
Well, it's an interesting conversation because you can say internal sponsors are a must, but I also find that, over the last many years, there's not a lot of opportunity for that. There's not a lot of opportunity and overlap in the ability to set somebody up to experiment and fail. So it's always really good to have sponsors internally in your organization, especially as everyone aspires to do more, take on more, learn more. External sponsors are good because networks are really the currency of your professional career. I have always found that internal sponsors kind of become external sponsors as you move around the industry. So for me, I think that a sponsor is good in wherever they're coming from, especially if they're willing to speak for you and with you and help you get where you want to go.
That's a great way to think about it. A, you can't have too many, and B, who's internal today might be external tomorrow. So you can't stay stuck in time, right? How you think about this. I wondered, when you think about some of the don't do's, not just the must do's with a sponsor, but the don't do's, are there certain pitfalls you see people doing with their behaviors with a sponsor?
Well, I think that finding sponsors it has to be an authentic, organic experience. So there's a lot of people that go out and look like I need a sponsor, but really a lot of the time it happens organically when there's something specific that you're interested in an organization that may be outside of your department or something that is outside of your discipline and you want to try something. I think that you have to approach it in a questioning manner, like, I'm interested in this. How would you think there's a way to get somewhere? And just really being interested in the experience and learning, you'll find who will sponsor you and create that bond to help in that arena. But you have to also really be performing where you are and to feel confident about the fact that you're contributing to the organization and driving the outcomes in the position you're in, to be able to go and say, there are things that I aspire to do more broadly, and then start that conversation and realize it may not be as binary as I would like to do this. Oh, let me see if I can help you. It should be a conversation around, well, what are the other interests or ways that you can get there?
So does it stand to reason the more you're out there having conversations with people you admire, whether it's a coffee or a formal office meeting, the more you're doing that, right? I mean, wouldn't you up your chances to see about that organic connection?
Yeah, I think that is true. And I think you can be more strategic about it. You can look for those coffee dates with people who have a relationship or have influence in the area that you're interested in. But just as you, what I try to help people with is to have the request framed as, how can I help you? How is it, I see there's an opportunity where I can use my skills to help in this area. Like, how do you think about that? Framing things in questions, encourage that dialogue to get to where you want to go. And sometimes what you go out for in terms of a specific ask or a specific area turns into something that is different but better or better suited. And I think that the other thing that I try to impress on people now that I'm on the other side of this is that you have to have patience, because, when you are young and you are driven in your career, and not just young, like, a lot of people just have this need to be progressing all the time. It's good to have quality relationships that get you there over time rather than burning kind of relationships trying to get to a place too quickly.
Yeah, yep. Guilty as charged with the needing to progress and, wanting to, go for the next thing, right? Always having your eye on the next thing and being impatient about that. What we know from some of the data is that people are under sponsored. This isn't happening everywhere we look. There was one stat that said 13% of women at large companies are sponsored. And we see a comment too from Anissa. I feel like this relationship could be a game changer, but I've never really found that unique opportunity. Are there some ways to be appealing to a sponsor? You talked about being a strong performer, but do you think there are other things to keep in mind?
Well, what happened this week was Catalyst came out with a really important new piece they published a new piece on interacting sexism, and it resonates very well with this conversation because it talks about how you have to have a sponsor who's not silent, because you can have a lot of fans, but a sponsor is really someone who will advocate in a way that is going to be progressive. And just like when you're asking for a recommendation for business school application or a reference for a job, you really have to specifically ask for, like, will you be willing to give me a positive recommendation? It's the same type of thing. Like, are you willing to sponsor me in my efforts to progress my career? Sometimes those sponsorship relationships may help you get into a career in a different company. You have to just really be open to it. But you need someone who will really be there and act and speak for you rather than just a cheerleader, because I find that you have plenty of cheerleaders, you have plenty of fans, and that's really good. But in order to drive the outcome that you are looking for, you should have somebody who has committed to speak on your behalf or act on your behalf.
I like that idea of being a little more direct with people and maybe formalizing it with the question. Because don't we all want clear expectations? Like, we don't want to feel like we're doing a dance that we don't really know the dance steps. I mean, it's nice to be clear about it. There's a great question from Anjali who's joining us, and she wanted to know, relating to those coffees and meetups, with leaders. Do you think Zoom is just as effective for those, that's a good thing to do right now in this environment?
I do. In fact, when we went, fully remote post COVID, we had a coffee chat channel already started at Catalyst. And the reason we do this is that a lot of our staff and leadership have worked remotely even before this. So we've pivoted really quickly and well. And so my coffee chat was with somebody in our Zurich office. And so we had our coffee chat, and I actually called on her this week to do me a favor. And it's something that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. And whether we were in the office or not, we would have had to do it remotely. So I actually think the Zoom and Teams, which is what we use, the remote conversations can be very impactful, especially for me, who tends to try to do a lot of things at one time, and it creates focus. And so that focus also helps in understanding where somebody wants to go with the conversation.
That's great. Yeah, there's so many meetings right now that are all about the business that it might stand out as a positive thing to talk career with someone, right? It's a different kind of cognitive demand than a hardcore work session. I want to flip it for a minute, Stacey, and ask about sponsoring yourself. Right? There's a lot of people who are part of today's session who have clout, who have influenced themselves to maybe help pull up somebody else. Are there some things you think they should keep in mind as they think about maximizing that sponsor protege relationship?
Yeah, I think that for most of those people, they probably have, had that relationship. What I find most impactful, and when I think about all of the people who I've worked with over so many years and who I'm still in touch with, it's really about understanding. I tend to want to sponsor people where I see high potential, and maybe it's actually coming out in a behavior that is looked upon as, maybe a little more abrasive than one would think, or you hear things about someone like, this person is really great and they're doing great things, but not really the team player that we want this person to be. And where I can influence there, I do try to step in, because the one thing that we don't have anywhere uh, near where when I was, younger in my career, is really the overlap and the ability to take the time and have that resource for learning and development. We've outsourced, our learning and development to these LMS systems. The PEVC world, it's not like you have learning and development as an investment priority. And learning and development was also, a discretionary cost that was offboarded, starting with one of the first financial collapses, or recession type situations, many years ago. So I try to reach out where I hear that people are doing interesting things. And sometimes, as when you have a strength and you have a high potential person, there are some weaknesses there, and that's like the opportunity to try to bring those things together into something that will provide the organization with some real talent.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And Viba kind of pivoted a little bit your advice there with a good question. And she said, is there a way to look for a sponsor in a way that's discreet, not giving away that you're really strongly looking for a change in a way that's not disloyal, maybe to your own leader? Do you see that dynamic, or any thoughts on managing that well?
Yeah, there's no, I mean, to be a sponsor doesn't mean you have to sponsor some predetermined course. It's really just establishing a relationship, and someone putting 15 to 20 minutes in my calendar. I'm very like open door, open calendar, and having a conversation, just getting to know someone. You can feel out whether that opportunity exists with that leader, especially female leaders, and trying to really progress all of our opportunities. Everyone's open to having those conversations. It doesn't have to be about something specific. It could just be about something you're trying to improve in yourself, or some feedback on. There's somebody. The way that I got the sponsor around the Women's Leadership Initiative is that I literally had asked this person in a committee meeting, can you give me some feedback around how I sound and how I'm coming across? Am I getting my point across? Are we moving the needle? And just creating that safe space where you could take the constructive criticism, and asking for that, I think, opens a lot of doors. And sometimes it stings at first, but you always take it with you, and then you see that people can take feedback and improve. You've created that organic relationship.
That's awesome. And I think that the trust and the safety is huge. What a privilege to get to have that kind of relationship. And so some of the takeaways from your good advice that I'm hearing are, if you're in a position to sponsor, don't just look for that perfect A plus, individual who, let's be honest, they're probably going to get sponsored in their career. But what about the person who's really strong, but maybe struggling with a little something? I think that's a very human way to approach lending your clout and your influence to someone else, looking for that person who's high potential, but maybe not, A plus level yet. So I think that's a great thing for all of us to think about. The other thing I just want to say here is, if you're in a position to sponsor, look for somebody who's maybe not exactly like you, right? We know that some of the stats are even worse. For example, for women of color, Black women, Hispanic women are much less likely to be sponsored. And yet it can be a total career making relationship. So thinking about who you're sponsoring is really important here. Stacey, would you talk to us at all about, let's say you've gotten the sponsor, you've benefited from that relationship in some way, they've pounded the table for you to move up. Are there good ways to acknowledge them or thank them in some way?
Well, I think part of the acknowledgement is just being successful and contributing back into the holistic environment of the organization. You know, I know that besides all of my three kids in their 20s and doing way too much sponsorship, mentorship there, like I just want people to feel empowered to take the next steps themselves and pay it forward, and to understand how they can provide whatever, small opportunity I've provided to someone else. And I think that's really the best way to be grateful. Otherwise just being good corporate citizens together and having a good time. And, especially in these times, it's just good to create those relationships. So I don't think there's that much gratitude, but this all goes into creating your network over time. And there's been sponsors of mine who have come back and asked for help when they've been looking for new positions or have been looking for somebody to bounce something off of. And so that just feels good. I think that you should just try to pay it forward.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the sponsoring somebody different than you. Dr. Maya Rockymore Cummings, who's an incredible leader who I've had the privilege to interview, has a great question about it. And she says, have you sponsored, or when you sponsor someone of a different gender, or somebody of a different race, is there a different dynamic in those circumstances? Is there does it change the setup of that relationship?
It's interesting. I don't find there to be a different dynamic at all. But I do think that the sponsorship or how you help someone along can be different for the dynamics. Again, when I'm asked a lot more from young women about how to do things or how to get places, because they don't have the same voice, and that to me is the hardest uh, the hardest way, the hardest information to give. But like my daughter's 28, and help her, I help prep her for conversations with leadership. And I find even with me, it's easier for me to mentor about having a voice and speaking up and being direct about what you want than I could have done myself, right? I am from that whole imposter complex generation that I've had to work towards. So I think I think you have to meet them where they are. And I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that. I think that everybody has their own strengths and struggle in different ways. But I do think that, people of color, men, women, all will have, a different, it's just a personal thing. I don't even know if it's a demographic thing. It's a personal thing they're trying to overcome or they're trying to advance. And you just have to help talk through how to best get them to the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of meeting the person where they are. If it's that they're not being heard in meetings or they're not being seen fully, or, um, you know, credit is being claimed by somebody else for the
That's a
things
big
they're
one.
bringing to the table.
Credit and promotion. Credit and promotion are the two biggest themes right now.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you that as a one last question, Stacey, which is, you all at Catalyst are doing the work of keeping gender inclusion front and center for people. How are some of the most progressive organizations doing that? How are they keeping it so it doesn't fall off the radar?
It's interesting again, like things I couldn't have answered a week ago, but our supporters are very large organizations, and right now everybody is very open to learning and sharing at every level, whether it's the CEOs or HR or CDOs. They want to just get in a room and share and learn from each other best practices. And we are helping to enable that more and more every day, as well as provide all of our research and all of our services as well. So that is very front and center, and there's a big demand for that. And so it's something that we have always done, but now is really 360-degree demand.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a huge contribution alone just to create a place for dialogue
Mhm.
and for sharing best practices, right? I think it's underrated. So I'm happy to hear you're doing that. You know, Stacey, you have woven this very inspiring, very inspiring career. And I feel like you've done it very much in alignment with your values and your interests. So I'm so grateful to hear your story, and I think you've empowered a lot of the rest of us, to not just engage a sponsor or be a sponsor, but to kind of create our career plan, the one we want, not what's going to work for somebody else, but to really make it our own. And so I love that. Thank you for sharing your story today and your excellent advice. For all of you, you can follow Stacey here on LinkedIn. And you'll see in the show notes coming some links to Catalyst's really excellent work, not just around sponsors, but that new research Stacey mentioned, what makes men act or not act when faced with sexism, right? That's playing out in front of them. I hope you'll also stay in touch with me to please check out my LinkedIn learning courses so that you have the confidence to go forward boldly and engage that sponsor. Stay in touch as part of our newsletter tribe. Follow me here on LinkedIn. I hope for all of you, you'll stay healthy and well, and that you'll remember to kind of bet on yourself. Bet on yourself if you want other people to bet on you, right? Show that you see your own value. Thank you again, Stacey, and to
Thank
all
you.
of you, lead on.